The allure of the RMS Titanic was not just the size and luxury that it offered passengers, but also the audacity of the human spirit that it represented. It was called the unsinkable ship, yet we all know how that story ends. And now I feel like everybody in the AI industry is telling us that artificial intelligence is going to bring us that same kind of luxury. And they're not wrong. I believe it'll bring us entertainment, education, and medicine, but what will the final cost be? Eliazer Yukowski describes artificial intelligence as
AI is nuclear weapons, but they spit up gold up until they get too large and then ignite the atmosphere.
And look, I'm not above it. I'm like totally tempted by the idea of unimaginable luxury. The longevity and health span that I might get from AI's personal medicine. Autonomous cars are chauffeurs. All entertainment will become like a personalized video game. Personal assistants, personal medicine, autonomous cars, personalized video games, and Hollywood movies that are all customized for your personal viewing pleasure. And I love thinking about all of that. I just know that there's other future possibilities where, like the Titanic, everything seems like it's smooth sailing up until the point where we're suddenly surprised. But here's the important part of the story, the word that we really should try to get out there to all the people that we know personally. We can have those benefits and we can minimize the risks. But we have to minimize the risks. If everybody exercised that, we would have such a better chance of making sure that the alignment problem is solved correctly. But actually, the biggest concerns about the alignment problem, at the end of the day, they're people problems. A mad rush to make it more and more capable without understanding why it's becoming capable and what that means for our long-term future.
Progress on understanding what goes on in there and shaping it is going enormously slower than the mounting capabilities. Heads of the operations building this stuff do not appear to be taking it anything remotely like what I would call seriously. It's just like, ha ha ha, lol, lol, lol. That's not what you want when you're trying to do an unprecedented scientific feat of science and engineering and having it work correctly on the first try or the entire human species dies.
And that's why the journey that we're all on together, the journey of aligning artificial intelligence, mirrors the story of the Titanic surprisingly well. Promise, ambition, hubris, luxury, it's all there, along with the unknown unknowns. How big are the icebergs, because we only see the tip, and how many of them are there? And since we're all in this metaphorical Titanic anyways, if we don't address that together, we're flying blind. And granted, it's a beautiful ship, as long as you stay ignorant to the risks from the navigator. And when you ask about safety, somebody points to how there's some lifeboats over there, and the ship's bigger and stronger than any other one, and there's 5 compartments, and we've got a really good lookout tower and flares, and we can move the ship, so yeah, we got plenty of protections. But when your cargo is all of humanity, how do you leave the dock and set sail without being as completely safe as humanly possible? Like, in metaphor speak, this is a journey that we all have to take together, so I get that we have to leave the dock at some point. But if the cargo is literally all of humanity, we can put more effort into safety. I don't know, like, I'm just worried because in the realm of artificial intelligence, the phrase like too little too late pops into my head all the time. But just because you and I are ignorant to how many icebergs there are and how big each one is, doesn't make the journey any safer. And the people that are steering the ship, basically the big governments and big tech companies, when you ask them about safety, they won't give you nothing as an answer. But if you actually look at the budget for the Titanic, I feel like that's another good analogy because you would have seen so much money going into the luxury swimming pool and the dining hall than it did into the lifeboats because nobody bought a ticket because of how great the lifeboats are. But they should have, you know what I mean? And if that's too much to ask for the people who are buying tickets to the Titanic, somebody who built it, somebody who owns the company, the main people in charge at least should have been responsible and thought through it. And the same with today. We have to ask the governments and big tech companies, can you put 10 times the amount of money into protecting us that you do to actually making this thing more feature complete? Heck, 100 times, 1,000 times, 1,000,000 times, it would all actually make sense when you think about what's on the line. It's completely clear to me that AI will revolutionize the world. We don't program anymore, machines learn how to do things. And the kind of breakthroughs that led to RNNs and transformers and now the new multimodal stuff, that has required the most impressive innovation, curiosity, engineering, and creativity I have ever seen. Like the investment, the open source community, the worldwide collaboration, it's just incredible. But if that same effort was going into safety instead of making these things more capable, I would feel way better about our chances. And of course, there's more money in safety alignment research than there ever has been before. But comparatively, it's not where it needs to be. And it's hardly the area of research with the unlimited funds or that top talent is begging to get into. And unfortunately, that's just human nature. It's way more fun to make these things more capable and show some amazing thing to your investors.
You got a bunch of people who are like in the short term, like getting excited looks at parties, which is why they do everything they do. And they can get that by like building scarier and scarier AI. And some actual uses. You know, some of the technologies coming out of this would be an enormous spoon. But if you were taking this seriously, you know, put the whole thing on international lockdown and like have the good uses, the most important good uses, like the medical stuff, AlphaFold, without training the general systems much more powerful than GPT-4.
So I think government kind of needs to make the boring investments, and government needs to step into the corporations and say, hey, sorry, you can't develop this any further unless you put 100 times the money into the safety first. And if it's about competing nations and you're worried about one country falling behind, you're right, you should be. That's another human problem that we have to solve. And the best tool that we have for that is just trying to get the other superpowers to the table and say, hey, this isn't an ego thing. This is just a reality thing. If we only get one shot at this, and runaway AI does take place, or it happens in some kind of military way, or some way that just we can't turn it off and it's doing something that we don't like, everyone on the planet will wonder, like, why did we jump into this so fast? For 5 to 10 years of advanced pleasure? To risk the entire foreseeable future? There's no other intelligent species that we know of that can just like, if we screw up, at least they'll be here. Now, I would argue that the most important person you should know about if you care about artificial intelligence or the future of humanity right now would be this man, Eliazer Yukowski. This is somebody who has cared about AI alignment his entire career. He has gone through phases, learned from mistakes, and come to the conclusion that the risk right now is higher than ever before. He has spent his life analyzing the decisions that governments, Elon Musk, big companies have been making, and he's marginally happy that some people are starting to come around to the idea, but he's got that same mentality that it probably is too little too late at this point. Now, lucky for us, this 3-hour interview that was done by the Logan Bartlett Show really gives you a sense for where I'm getting my ideas from and putting this whole thing into a larger perspective from an expert's point of view, not a YouTuber's. I think this is the best interview that he's ever done, and I've listened to like probably half a dozen or so. And at the core of everything he's saying, you'll get to this one conclusion, and that's that there's just one shot at this. And with that mentality, it's like humanity is going to the casino and betting everything we own on a game that we have no idea what the odds are. And he describes why it's different this time from other technologies in history because we always got second, third, fourth tries at everything. It turned out what Marie Curie was doing was super deadly, but at the end of the day, it didn't destroy the whole world. So we got a chance to learn what made it deadly and put safety protocols in place, and now we understand radiation. But because of the nature of superintelligent is such that it never goes back in the bottle, we're kind of dealing with a totally different level of risk-reward ratio. And our natural competitive tribal nature, along with the fact that the tragedy of the common means that usually always the whole group ends up in the worst position without strong coordination. So there's so many comments I could highlight from this podcast, but I would just encourage you to go to the link and listen to the whole thing below because I'm not going to do it justice. But just in case you're not going to do that, let's jump to a concrete example of what Eliazer would actually do if he was in control right now. Because it's vastly different from anything I've heard anybody else say. He argues that you have to sit down with some kind of world coalition, or at least as many countries as you can get to, and get them all to agree that it's completely illegal for any company to run a gigantic training run, something the likes of GPT-5 or above. Right now, the kind of compute that you need to push these cutting-edge models requires entire server farms. Like giant airplane hangar-sized buildings all full of GPUs running pretty much full-time. And because of that, there's still a chance kind of right now to really keep track of where all the GPUs from NVIDIA go, and then in these big farms, keep track of them. Now, he acknowledges there's benefits that can come from these training runs. So we don't want to shut them down, but there should be coordination, regulation from multi-governments and companies about what exactly you're training and why. And if any country or company tries to push one of the models to capabilities that we don't feel like we completely understand yet, then the international body should come in and put a halt to it. And of course, some countries might be distrustful, thinking that this is a tool one of the other countries is using to keep them down so they can get the capabilities for themselves. And there's not a great answer for that, but you'd have to just try your best to honestly work through it. Show that this is how we're regulating things. Make sure they have access to look into the systems in your country and just give up on all that stuff. And then also say, by the way, like, we need access into your information the same way you do of ours. And if you're not going to do it, then he actually goes to the extreme and says, well, we should launch a conventional strike then. Like, actually blow up the building. Like, if there's a big airplane hangar that's full of GPUs and it's contraband and they won't give anyone access into what they're training it on, then he's like, look, this is humanity. You got to go in there and just take that out. You know, and the whole time trying to telegraph that, like, this is not an ego thing. This is not about our country having more power than yours. This is a humanity thing. And humanity things require trust and cooperation. So you'd have to just say, what is it that you need for me to trust me? And put that out on the negotiating table, give it to them, and require the same back.